Hi, and welcome to my Big Red Couch. Real conversations, real people, real life. Today's topic of discussion on my Big Red Couch is depression and the effects it has not only on the person who's going through depression, but also on their family and their friends. With me today is Elaine Steuber. Welcome, Elaine. And before I get you to talk about your story and your history, I'm going to read a few tips that I picked up on the internet about depression. Depression is a medical condition that can affect a person's ability to work, study, interact with people, or take care of themselves. Depression affects 19 million U.S. adults, and it can occur as a one-time incident during a time of distress or throughout a person's life. Depression affects 1 in 10 U.S. adults. 54% of people believe depression is a personal weakness.
Yes, and that's a stigma that's going on still in the USA today.
41% of depressed women are too embarrassed to seek help, and I know a lot of women can identify with this. 15% of depressed people will commit suicide. Depression will be the second largest killer after heart disease by 2020. That's an alarming statistic. And studies show that depression is a contributing factor to fatal coronary diseases. And the one really outstanding thing to me is that 30% of women are depressed. That's like 1/3 of all women. Right. And that's a big chunk of the demographic. Men's figures are previously thought to be half that of women, but new estimates are higher. What are some of your views on what I've just read?
Well, I think a lot of women, and not only women, but children that suffer from depression, or anybody that suffers from depression, they don't seek help. They don't talk to anybody about it. They don't open up because even in this day and age, there's still that stigma. People tend to put a label on it. They tend to think that, oh, you're just looking for attention. You're weak. Why can't you just snap out of it? There is a difference between clinical depression and depression.
Okay, I'll stop you right there. Before we go on, I want you to share a little bit about your family life. Are you married? Do you have kids?
I have been married for 15 years. My husband's an alcoholic, and of course, along with the alcoholism is the underlying depression. And he's been out of our house more than he's ever been in. This time, it's finally irrevocably broken, and we'll be proceeding with that. I have a daughter who's 14, and of course, depression, alcoholism, OCD, any of these things are also familial. They're genetic. They do get passed down. So my 14-year-old daughter is already on medication for anxiety and struggling right now. We're trying to get her on the right path, and she's in counseling. I have a 10-year-old son, and I have 3 sisters, and my parents have actually been married for 61 years.
Oh, wonderful.
Yes.
Wonderful. And can you share with us a little bit about your professional background and the field that you're in right now?
I did work for 10 years as a civilian secretary for the Air Force. I even had a top secret clearance at one time.
Ooh.
I met General Colin Powell before he became famous with Desert Storm.
Nice.
And from there, I went into nursing, and I worked on an oncology unit in a hospital, to family medicine, internal medicine, and even did 3 years in a psych hospital.
Oh, wow.
So in the past 3 years, I worked for an accountant, and although I'm not there now, that actually is the biggest passion I have. I actually like doing taxes. So
wonderful.
I'm actually starting to pursue that avenue. I'm temporarily working as a nurse right now doing flu clinics, but eventually I would like to just do accounting.
Okay, and I know that you've been really open and honest in sharing your diagnosis as being clinically depressed, and you were about to share the differences with being clinically depressed and going through depression as a one-time event, whether it be with the loss of a loved one or a breakup in a relationship. How would you really describe being clinically depressed?
Right. Depression as a one-time event, when you lose somebody or a breakup, that's more of what everybody calls being blue, and you're down, and you go through a process where you grieve or you get angry and you mourn, and then it's done. Whereas clinical depression, you actually have a serotonin imbalance in your brain. Some people more severe than others. That's why there's medication. Some people respond to medications that other people don't, and that's why there's so many different antidepressants out there. And it's clinical depression is not something that you can just snap out of. The clinical depression, another stigma that people have is sometimes they think that people with these issues are freaks, retarded, weak, and that's not the case. And a lot of them are very intelligent, like myself, I must say. So, I do have a history. My complete diagnosis is major depressive disorder. I have ADD. I have borderline personality disorder. And what that is, it encompasses poor coping skills, anxiety, and panic. The other thing to mention with clinical depression is even on medications, as you age, and unfortunately, I've noticed that, although I'm still 21, that your hormones and your body changes really affect it more. And so now when I have a panic attack, the result is much worse. I go into full convulsions and I stop breathing. So, those are things to keep in mind, whereas regular one-time event depression, those aren't factors.
Okay. And one of the statistics that I read was that 15% of people who are depressed will commit suicide. And I don't know if it's going to be comfortable for you or not, but I know that you've entertained suicidal thoughts. So what was your earliest memory of having those kinds of thoughts?
I actually can remember back when I was 8 years old. I lived in a neighborhood that everybody, I think they were all crazy. I wasn't. But I went through a lot of bullying to an extreme, physical bullying, not only emotional bullying. And I can remember breaking a mirror and actually using the glass from the mirror to attempt suicide. I had another attempt when I was 13. I had been raped. I wanted friends so badly because I had gone without having friends for so long due to the bullying issue that I met a girl. We moved to a new neighborhood. I went to a new school. I met a girl. She was more advanced. I kind of went from Barbie dolls to boys overnight. And so I had a party when my parents were away, and I got drunk, I passed out, and I woke up and I was being raped to an audience. So, of course, that was quite devastating. When you already have poor coping skills, then, I can remember at 21, after a breakup, I can remember at 25, I can remember at 37. The one at 37 was pretty significant. I had just had a horrible year. My husband was out. We went through hurricanes, the whole financial thing. I was taking care of 2 kids and working 2 jobs, and it was just too overwhelming. And unfortunately, I do have that little bit of pride in me that I don't reach out for help and ask, because I can do it. And so I ended up just really having a hard time. I went in the hospital, and the doctor in the hospital prescribed me Ritalin, which is a stimulant. And apparently I don't do well with stimulants. And so that actually tweaked me over the edge. And so I attempted suicide. I actually spent 3 days in ICU on life support in a coma, and then proceeded to stay in the hospital for another month. My most recent attempt was in December, and I had had a hysterectomy last August, and my gynecologist apparently didn't understand depression, like many people.
Like most people. Mm-hmm.
And he didn't feel it was necessary to put me on hormones. And so that just got the ball rolling, where my hormones were all unbalanced, my serotonin level was going crazy, my marriage was over, the finances. I had planned a birthday gathering for my birthday.
Yes.
One of my very close friends did not want to come, and it really, really hurt me, and it cut to the core. But yet I didn't speak up and say, this really hurts, this really bothers me. And after she did, a couple more friends of mine bailed out as well, and it just kind of set me over the edge. And so I attempted suicide. Unfortunately, my children were in the house. Fortunately, my husband was in the house, so he called the ambulance. And so I spent another week in the hospital at that point. It takes a lot of work on the person's behalf that has the mental illness, because you really have to make sure your medications are the right medications. You have to make sure you're in counseling. You have to make sure you ask for help. You have to have faith, whether you believe in God or whoever your higher power is, you need to have faith and believe in somebody that you can get through this.
And how has this affected your relationships with not only your children and your husband, but also with your family in general? How has this affected it? How have they been supportive of you? How do you describe your relationship with your family as a result of your mental illness?
Well, unfortunately, my children worry a lot about me, which they shouldn't have to have that at their young ages, but they do. They've seen a lot, and so they see when I start going south, they, kind of tighten themselves in, which maybe won't be such a bad thing, because hopefully that'll keep them out of trouble. I can always fake it, too.
Not a good idea.
But my sisters, unfortunately, over the years, I've given them a lot of literature, some in layman terms to the point of like cartoon characters, and there's just that block. Everybody has that stigma, everybody has that block. They don't want to accept it, they don't want to acknowledge it. So a lot of people feel that if they just ignore it, it'll go away. My sisters don't understand it. They haven't tried to understand it. I know my one sister thinks that this is just for attention. But, like I've said, if I really wanted attention that badly, I'll run through the street naked. So I could think of better ways to get attention. My dad, who himself, of course, undiagnosed and unrecognized, has a lot of the same issues, never went treated, and so he's actually more angry. He's angry that all these things have happened, and
maybe he's angry also because he recognizes himself in you.
Right. Yeah. And that does work too. I see a lot of times when I think, oh wow, that was really a mom moment or a dad moment. Oh, I got to check myself. So you just have to deal with it the way you do.
And how are you coping now? Because you've mentioned all these suicidal attempts, and the last one was almost a year ago. How are you coping now? How is your family life now? how are you dealing with life at this moment?
Well, I'm back in counseling.
Good.
And I have books about this high that I'm reading on a spiritual journey. I'm doing a 12-step program. I'm reading a book on boundaries and doing a workbook, which boundaries is when you can say no to people. And that's been an issue for me. I feel because of the bullying that I had when I was younger and I was alone so many years, I just want people to like me. And so I will do everything above and beyond my capabilities or my financial capabilities to help others. And so now I'm starting to learn to say no. I have not let my husband back in the house, and I'm standing firm. Yay me, first time in 15 years.
I know, and that's another story.
My children, the other night, they were giving me a hard time, and I said, you know what? I knew I was heading over the edge, so I just got my keys and I left. And I met my counselor, and I stayed out for a while. And my kids were fine. They knew how to feed themselves, and they put themselves to bed. And it was really an eye-opener for my children because they were like, wow, she's serious.
Yes.
And, we need to really shape up. So I'm learning to stand firm and say no.
Okay, what's the biggest piece of advice that you would give to someone going through depression right now, or even advice to their family or friends on how to deal with that person? Because in your case and in a lot of other people's cases, we realize that people just don't know how to deal with people going through depression. What's your biggest piece of advice that you can give?
The number one foremost is love them and support them. 2 would be, don't ignore it. Ignoring it is not going to make it go away. To just be there to listen, not necessarily. Sometimes when somebody's going through the depression or they're in a funk, I'll call it, they're already overwhelmed.
Yes.
So for somebody to come in and say, well, you should do this and you should do that and you need to do this and you need to do that, makes the overwhelming feeling even worse. So sometimes when somebody's going through that, they just need somebody to say, I'm listening, I'm here for you. And the other biggest thing is just, if you have somebody in your life, a family member, friend, whatever, that's struggling with this, is get educated.
Yes.
Get educated so that you can understand and so you can be there to help. And I'm not saying that somebody needs to coddle them, baby them, but to just be there so that they know. It's almost like Linus with the blanket. He needed that blanket. The blanket didn't do anything, but it was there.
Right.
And it's kind of the same thing. And for somebody who does have mental illness, it's nothing to be embarrassed about or ashamed about. It's a disease. It's an illness. And, don't be afraid of what people think or people judging you or anybody's comments. The best thing you can do for yourself is admit it, recognize it, and get your help.
Well, thank you so much, Elaine, for being so open and honest with us and sharing your journey. And I really wish you all the best. I know that you are a strong mama, and we're going to be going out to have a drink sometime.
Oh, yeah.
Yes. So,
although I didn't say that because you're not supposed to drink on antidepressants, but
no, we're gonna be
anybody.
drinking sparkling wine.
That's right.
Thank you so much, Elaine.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.